I really believe that your story is how people understand who you are and why you do what you do. Welcome to Your Creative Mind. I'm Izolda Trachtenberg, and this podcast is all about using your innate creativity and mindfulness to build a life you love. Whether it's through writing, music, dance, theater, or any creative pursuit, we'll explore how to tap into your unique potential to transform your work, relationships, and daily life. Through inspiring conversations with world-changing artists, entrepreneurs, and innovators, or actionable insights in my solo episodes, you'll learn how to focus your energy, ignite your creativity, and bring more joy and purpose to everything you do. Hello, and welcome to the Your Creative Mind podcast. I'm your host, Izolda Trachtenberg. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Today, I want to talk about something that I think could shift the way you communicate, the way you build relationships, and grow in your life and in your work, whether you're an artist, a professional, a leader, whatever it is you are. Today's episode is all about your story. It's about why it matters, about where to share it, and how to tell it so that it lands with honesty, power, purpose, and most of all, kindness. So let's start there. Why should you be telling your story? Now, if you listen to the show at all, I think you've heard me talk about this over the years, that we're all storytellers. The first time you were late when you were a kid, you were supposed to be home by 9, you didn't show up till 11:30, and you told a wild tale about all the reasons why you were late. And hopefully your parents didn't ground you too badly or punish you worse. But yeah, if you did that, if you made that excuse, if you told a wild tale, if you told even a simple tale, you were storytelling. Anytime you communicate about pretty much anything, if you are using information that isn't about the specific thing you're saying, you're storytelling. And if you are talking about the specific thing you're talking about, I know that sounds a little recursive, but it's true, you're still storytelling. So this is really about why you should be telling your story, right? So I want to break the myth first. A lot of people think they don't have a story worth telling. I think we tell ourselves that all the time, don't we? That inner monologue doesn't make you feel like, ta-da, here I am, world. Most of the time, I'm willing to bet your inner monologue is doing the stay down, hush up, nobody wants to hear it. Well, I'm here to tell you that your story isn't about being flashy or dramatic unless you happen to be someone who's flashy and dramatic, truly, because your story is about being true. Your story is really how people understand who you are. Now, if you're listening to this episode and you've listened to the show at all, you probably have a pretty good idea of who I am, of what I do, of what I believe, and of how I live my days in this city that I love so much in New York City. But I'm a work in progress like everybody else. I actually had someone the other day. I was in a writing group, and it was the Writing Sprints Day, and I was mentioning in my check-in that I had just finished my taxes, and it had been a really tough time doing my taxes because normally I try to reconcile everything weekly just so that I don't have this overwhelming, holy crap, there's a mountain coming towards me because taxes are due every year. This year, I got off track back in April of 2024. So I had pretty much 9 months worth of reconciliation to do to label everything for my business. And instead of doing it weekly, which makes it take about 15, 20 minutes a week, it took days. Why? Because I waited too long. For various reasons, my Sunday mornings is when I do this usually, and instead of doing it, things were upsetting me, I guess, and I'm not going to tell you why. It's just personal and blah, blah, blah. But my Sunday mornings were usually ruined, and when they were ruined, I just didn't have it in me to then sit down and do something that I didn't want to do, which is that reconciliation. And so as I mentioned this to the person on Zoom during the writing sprint, she said, "Oh, wow, that's amazing. That makes me realize you're not perfect." And I went, "My goodness, where would anybody get the idea that I'm perfect? I'm so far from it. The best we can do is the best we can do, right?" And I talked to my husband about this, and he said, "Well, you do kind of give off that vibe that if you're not perfect, you're certainly striving for perfect." And what's really funny as I say this is I'm looking at a little, I don't even know what to call it. It's 3D printout of a saying that I came up with for myself and for my coaching clients, and that is make marvelous mistakes. So my life isn't about trying to be perfect. My life is about really failing, rising again, trying something new, failing, rising again, trying something new, succeeding, failing, rising, trying something new, and doing it, swinging for the fences, to use a baseball metaphor, even though I'm a lousy baseball player. So that's another reason I'm not perfect. But it was really interesting that that's what I give off, that the story that I'm telling seems to be coming across, that I somehow either feel or act like I'm perfect, or at least that's what she was getting from what I was saying. And, I'm like, okay, so I have to become a lot more truthful, I guess, and maybe share my struggles a bit more. And I'm not the kind of person who shares my struggles. I share my process, as in I'm a work in process or a work in progress. But I don't often share my struggles. And unless I'm talking about hypothyroidism or my fibromyalgia or my knees or something like that, I don't really talk about the stuff that makes me want to gnash my teeth and beat my breast. And that's because it's kind of like posting on Facebook or Blue Sky or any of the other social media platforms. I don't tend to take my personal stuff into that arena in that way, just because I feel like that's not the forum. But maybe that should be. Maybe it should be more the forum, because if someone I consider a friend thinks, "Oh, Izolda's perfect," or trying to be perfect, or trying to seem like she's perfect, then I kind of have to go, okay, maybe I need to figure out what's wrong with the way I'm telling my story, because I really believe that your story is how people understand who you are and why you do what you do and what it means to them. And I guess the thing is that on a personal level, I probably don't share my struggles with anybody but close friends, which I think is fair. But professionally, my story is one that has a lot of trials and tribulations. I survived living in a war zone when I was a kid. I survived an abusive childhood, and I'm here to tell the tale, right? And I'm here to tell you that you are not alone. If you've gone through similar things, you are not alone. And I say that to people. I will stand with the people I believe in and the people who need help, and especially the defenseless. As I put it to my friend Vaughn, until the end of days. That's part of who I am, and that's part of my story, is standing up for people who are helpless and for critters who are helpless. Those who have no defense have a defender in me, and that's part of my story. That's always going to be part of my story. And some of that is as a result of my abusive childhood. I realized that I didn't want that to happen to anybody else, certainly, but also, if I see it happening, I'll stop it. I will call it out. I will stop it. The police will get involved, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not afraid of that. I'm more afraid of leaving any being in pain. So that's my story about that. But to get back to what I'm talking about, I guess the way I look at storytelling here is on a professional level or on a creative or performing artist level. People aren't going to connect with your credentials, with your titles, or even with perfect outcomes. Absolutely not. Like, I will put up when I submit plays to festivals, I'll put up when I'm a semifinalist or a finalist. I'll put up on social and on this show when I don't make it. I will also put up when I do. My play expiration date, which if you've been listening, you heard a table read of on this show a few weeks ago, a couple months ago now, I guess. It got accepted into a 10-minute play festival, the 29 Palms 10-minute play festival in California, which is exciting for me, and I love it, and I'm so thrilled. And actually, I have a feeling this episode is going to come out the day after the festival. So it has just happened if you're listening to this on May 5th, which is when I think I'm going to put this episode out. But the point is that, yes, I can put out when I'm successful, but I also put out when I'm in process, when I'm honing my craft. And in fact, I think I'm going to be starting a work in process episode of this show. I keep thinking I'm going to start another podcast. And then I go, why? Why start another podcast when I can do it on this one? And if you're interested in that, I'm thinking that that's going to be on Wednesdays, where I'm going to share what I'm writing, the stories that I'm creating, and I'm thinking of doing a romantasy. In fact, this is veering off into uncharted territory because I'm going all over the place, but I'm looking at a poster of the cover of my second fiction book, The Piano's Key, which is part of the Fairy Godmother Diaries. And here's the thing, that series I had listed as urban fantasy because it takes place in New York City, and it's got fantastical elements to it, but it also has romance. And I kept calling it urban fantasy, but it's not gritty like urban fantasy might be. So the story of those books has changed in my mind. And I think it's going to be, I'm going to retitle it a romantasy series. I think it's that. I think ultimately there's romance there. There are struggles in which the characters learn and grow and stress and do all these things. But I think it is a romantasy series, and I think I'm going to change the marketing for it some as I realize more about the story, right? As I deepen my emotional connection to it, I know more about it. And that's another thing that you can get out of telling your story. Your audience, whoever it is, the people you talk to, whether it's coworkers, colleagues, clients, customers, it doesn't matter. They're going to connect to the emotion, to the vulnerability, and to the transformation of who you are and the story you tell. And these two books, The Fiddler's Talisman and The Piano's Key, are transforming right before my eyes. I mean, the books themselves aren't, but how I view them, the story I tell myself about them is. And eventually when I write books 3, 4, and 5, and yes, I have books 3, 4, and 5 in my head, I just have to find the time to write them. I'm going to be focusing more on the romantic aspects of it, even though they take place. They're not all going to take place in New York City. There's going to be some travel down to Savannah, Georgia. There's going to be some travel down to New Orleans, and maybe even San Francisco, depending on where I am as far as in my head when I'm writing the books. But the story I tell myself about the series, the story I tell myself and tell you about what I did with these books, what I did with the stories I told. I thought it was one thing, and it turns out it's another. And I have to admit that mistake to myself and also now to you. And so think about it. Every time you've been moved or inspired or influenced, it probably came through a story, whether it's someone else's or the one you tell to yourself. And it's a moment that feels real. It's a process that somehow reminds you of your own. And I'm willing to bet that you've done things that you then go back and go, oh, so that's what that was. I have a friend, my friend Victor, who used to be married to another friend, Terry, and I'm going to cuss here. I usually don't on this show, but I'm going to. Because this is a really important moment in life, and it's about making not so marvelous mistakes, but making mistakes and owning when you've made a mistake, which I thought was just so, when I heard about it, I was so thrilled for him that he's that mature a person. So here's the deal. Victor was working on the pipes under their kitchen sink, and Terry had said, oh, honey, I think maybe we should call a plumber. And he said, no, I've got this. I've done something similar. I know how to do it. And so she went, okay. And she went into the other room to do whatever it was she was doing. And she hears from the kitchen, can you come in here? And she runs in, and water is just gushing from the pipes. And he looks at her and he goes, oh, babe, I fucked up. let's get a plumber. And she went, got it. And she dialed the phone and they had a plumber and they fixed it all up and blah, blah, blah. But he didn't blame anyone but himself. He accepted that he'd made a mistake. He'd accepted that, his story here was he thought he could do it, but it turned out he didn't have the skills. And he was mature enough to say, I messed up. I made a mistake. Let's fix it together. And when I hear that, I go, yeah, how can that not remind us of part of our own journey, right? So when you share your story, I just shared his, which I think is a really amazing story, because so many times we're taught not to admit that vulnerability, not to admit when we're fragile, not to admit when we've screwed up. And he just went, yep, that was me. That was my bad. Let's fix it. But when you do share your story, you build trust, because that's how you show your humanity. And you align yourself with the people who either follow you on social, or who are your clients and customers, or who are friends or family members. And then they get your values, and then they get what you envision for what you're trying to do. And you also build momentum, I think, because stories move people to do stuff. They move people to take action. And so whether you're trying to build a brand, or pitch an idea, or connect with clients, or pitch for a gig, or pitch to be on a podcast, or even navigate some sort of issue in your personal relationships, I'm here to tell you that storytelling is a superpower. And so that sort of brings me to, where should you be telling your story? Okay, so we've covered the why. I want to talk about the where. A lot of people think storytelling is something you do on a stage, or in a book, or in a formal interview, or you write a play, or a movie, or whatever. But really, your story belongs everywhere. And I wanted to sort of talk about some of the places I think are really the best and the most powerful places to tell your story. So podcasts, of course, because, hey, this is a podcast. Whether you're a guest or a host, podcasts they're really intimate. I mean, listen to me talk about the stuff that I survived just in this episode, right? They're intimate, and you're literally right at someone's ear, talking right to them. Whether you're being interviewed or you're hosting your own show, I think it's a space for real connection. And hopefully, certainly, if you're listening to this, I hope you feel connected to me, because as I talk about this stuff, I feel connected to you. And to me, that's really important, especially because in the age of social media, we tend to look at this stuff and go, oh, everybody's life is perfect, but it isn't, right? You're seeing the highlight reel. Please remember that. You're always seeing the highlight reel. Even when someone is posting about the horrors of what's going on, or the terrible day they're having, in that moment, that's the best they can do. And I myself don't tend to post about the bad day I'm having, just because, again, for me, that's not the appropriate forum, but lots of people believe it is. So that's something to think about. So podcasts are a great place to do it. Another place is LinkedIn, or other professional platforms, like if you're in professional groups on Facebook, somewhere like that. When you can share behind the scenes moments, what you learned, what you grappled with, what you came away with, you become someone people can relate to. You become more memorable. And I don't think it's about being polished. As you can tell by this show, I tell all of my guests, famously, as some of my guests have said, that I don't edit this show. This is as if we're sitting around having a cup of coffee together, because it's these real, full, honest conversations that are, to me, the most important, the most revealing, and the most transformative. So to me, ultimately, it's about being real. Okay, the next is your about page, or your bio. So I think these are really often written like resumes. What if instead you told the story of why you do what you do in your about page, if you have a website, because that's really the heart and soul of it in my mind. I mean, yes, you can talk about in the about page, you can do another sales pitch. You can talk about the benefits of what you do that your clients or customers will receive. Absolutely. So there's no doubt. And you can also pepper in the heart and soul of what you're doing. And that's Simon Sinek wrote an entire book about it, the why of it all. Okay. The next place is sales, conversations, or pitches. They say facts tell and stories sell. I know it's slanting businessy, but really a good story can shorten that gap between interest and investment because it shows that you care and it helps the people you're talking to see themselves in your solution, in your process, and in what you can work on together. The next place is workshops, talks, team meetings. Even a quick, tiny, well-told story can transform the energy. It can open minds. It can build connections between people. So the next time you feel stuck, reach for your story. And I do that all the time. I talk about when we were in Israel during the Yom Kippur War in 1973, and we constantly, the air raid sirens would go off and you'd hear the planes overhead. And we'd have to get down to the bomb shelters. And then you're sitting in the basement in a bomb shelter and you have to be with everyone else in the building. And people are freaking out. And so my mom and I used to sing. We used to actually softly sing folk songs to people. And I was 7 years old. Actually, I was 7 because I turned 7 during that war. So I was 7 years old and I would sing in harmony with her. And we would sort of calm people down and get them thinking about something other than the fact that we were in a bomb shelter and that the air raid sirens were still going off and that bombs were dropping. That's an important facet of who I am, actually. That need to help people feel better and be better stayed with me my whole life. Right? That is my story. I got started with it early on, and it was, I guess, forged in a time where I was like a sponge, right? I soaked up that notion, I guess, that if you can help people feel better, they will relax. If you can entertain them, if you can sing to them, if you can make music for them and with them, it will change things. It will change them. It will change the energy. I saw that early on. And that's one of the reasons I developed my Work in Harmony workshop now that I think about it, because I have that. I have that history. That's part of my story. And that's one of the reasons I try to do that workshop as often as I can, because people change. I watch them just blossom before my eyes. And there is nothing quite like that. And if you're listening to this and you've ever been to one of my workshops, you've seen it for yourself. And maybe you were one of the people who felt that transformation. And if you were, get in touch and let me know. I would love to hear from that. Okay. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about some techniques to improve your storytelling. How do you actually tell a better story? So I want to give you some techniques that can help no matter who you're talking to. First, you want to start with a moment of tension. We often try to set the stage way too much. You don't need a lot of the background. What you need is starting in the moment. Start with, in writing they say, start in the middle of the action. So what if you started in the moment of action, the phone call, the huge risk, the aha moment, the realization? Start where the stakes are high. That's how you grab attention. You don't necessarily want to start with, I opened my eyes and I woke up, but the cat jumped on my chest That might be a way to wake up, right? There, if the tension is higher, that's a way to do it. So, for example, instead of, I used to work in marketing, I was staring at my laptop and thinking, if I have to write one more fake sounding slogan, I'm going to throw the laptop out the window. Right? Now we're in it. Now we feel it. And that's a story. The other thing you can do, or another thing you can do, is to use vivid, sensuous details, right? Details for the senses. You don't want to just tell it. You want to show it as much as possible, right? So you don't want to just say you were nervous. Tell us about the sweat on your palms, or the the desert in your dry mouth, or the way your voice cracked on your first word. Make it real, and real makes it relatable. Remember what Maya Angelou said. They're not going to remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. And people remember feelings and images. They don't really remember generalities. So stick with the specific and stick with those sensory details, and that will really help. And also, and here's the third thing, you want to make your listener the hero. That is the magic. It's your story for sure, but if you frame it right, your audience is going to see themselves in it. They're going to imagine what they would do. They would imagine how they might respond. They will learn through your story, through you. And whenever you're telling a story, particularly in any kind of business or creative arts situation, end with a takeaway that is going to serve the person or people listening. So you wanted to say, for example, I learned that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Maybe you've been carrying it all alone too, and if so, I see you. And you don't have to carry it alone. There you go. That's not just a story, that's a connection. Alrighty. So here's the truth. Your story, whatever it is, whatever you're telling, it's not just a little tale of the past. It's more than a reflection of that. I think your story can be a tool for shaping who you are now and who you're going to be tomorrow. And it's going to help shape your relationships. It's going to help people know you. It's going to help people trust you. Particularly, I mean, let's just call it what it is. It's an authentic story. Don't make up stories, Unless you're writing or putting something on a stage or on a screen, your story should be your true story. Don't make up stuff and say, oh, I survived at a war zone when you didn't, right? You don't want to do that. I actually did survive a war zone. I was living in a country that was being torn apart by war when I was young. I actually did survive an abusive father. And you know what's weird about that is that as people get older, I remember very well. He doesn't. I haven't talked to him in 30 some odd years, but apparently he thinks he was not that bad. Even my cousin recently told me that from what he understood from my father, from talking to my father, he was tough but fair. That is the story my father tells himself, and it's the story he tells others, but really that story is just not true, right? And that's the problem, is that I listen to that and I go, no, that's not what's going on at all. That's not what happened. So why would I trust him? So you want to tell your story and you want it to be the truth. Because frankly, what are you doing if you're lying? Right? How do you build relationships that are real? So people really know you, so people really trust you if you're lying. Don't embellish. Just tell the truth using some of the techniques that I outlined above. And that's going to help people decide to walk alongside you. So tell it. Tell it truthfully. Tell it with your heart. Tell it in rooms you already belong in and ones you haven't even entered yet. Your story doesn't have to be perfect. Let's face it, this hasn't been. It just has to be true. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, this is awesome. If this resonated with you, I would love to hear your story. Drop me a DM or tag me on social or share this episode with someone who needs it. Until next time, this is Izolda Trachtenberg for the Your Creative Mind podcast, reminding you to be bold, be creative, and most of all, be kind. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Please subscribe to the podcast if you're new, and it would mean the world to me if you told a friend about it. Today's episode was produced by Izolda Trachtenberg and is copyright 2025. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope.